Hello out there. Are there many people out in the hall still? Oh, everyone's so nice and quiet. I like it. So what an amazing crowd we have tonight. It's so awesome to be in a room with a bunch of folks who are willing to get busy and lobby with us. Woo! So, you're going to come up with me? All right, get up here. Look at this, jazzy. This is what you have to wear when you're a paid lobbyist. You have to wear something really nice up to the hill. Paid, yes, paid lobbyist. When you're a citizen, you can wear whatever you want. So I'm Heather Stringfellow, and I'm with Planned Parenthood Association of Utah. I'm the Vice President of Public Policy. Yeah. And I'm joined with a few of my fellow activists, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hello, thank you guys so much for being here tonight. My name's Preston Hilburn, and I'm the programs manager at Equality Utah. And at Equality Utah, we always like to uplift and acknowledge that folks come from diverse backgrounds and may have different identities, and we never want to make assumptions about how folks identify, so we always use our preferred gender pronouns. My preferred gender pronouns are he, him, his.
All right. Thanks, Preston. Look at all of these people who are here who are ready to make some big change in Utah, right? How many of you were at the march on Monday? Yeah, so much power. How many of you are going to the March for Refugee Families on Saturday? Oh, yeah. Because there's a lot of power and a lot of energy, and I should introduce myself, I guess. Yeah, I'm Troy from Equality Utah. I use he, his, and him as well. And thank you so much for being here, because I know that things look dark and grim out there, but right here is the hope. Right here is the change, right? So I'm feeling it. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marina Lowe. I'm the Legislative Counsel with the ACLU of Utah. And I just have to echo the sentiments of my colleagues up here on the stage with me tonight. This is such an impressive crowd, and it gives me tremendous hope. I have given so many citizen lobby trainings over the years, and I have never seen a crowd this size. So thank you for coming.
So the idea, although this is a very large crowd, is to have more of an informal conversation if we can. We have a mobile mic and another one, so if we need to mosey out into the crowd, if you have a question and we want to broadcast it, please interact, ask us questions, because our hope for this evening is that you leave feeling prepared and have the answers to all the questions that are burning in your heart right now. So I don't know how we're going to work this. Am I going to cue the PowerPoint? Is that how it works, or do I do it myself? I must have to do it myself. A good old-fashioned way. Oh, look, my lovely assistant will help me. Yeah, you bet. Oh, yeah. See, we've got an organizer right here. Nice work. Yeah, squeeze in. There is quite a few people. There are quite a few people at the top. There you go. Raise your hand if you have a seat next to you. Here they come. Nice. There are 2 seats right down here in the front as well. There are a couple over here. There's plenty of room. Come on in. There are 3 seats right here. So I'll just run through the agenda very quickly while people are getting settled to keep us on schedule. So today, these are the things we want to talk about with you. We're going to talk a little bit about what is a community lobbyist, help you understand the legislative process, how an idea becomes a law in this great state, how to track a bill, and how to participate, how you can, before you leave today, have it in your mind how you'd like to participate as a citizen lobbyist, and also the hot topics for this legislative session. You know, today was day 10. We have a 45-day legislative session, and so we just kissed day 10 goodbye. but we have 35 more days, and it could be pretty exciting. So we'll give you some of the hot topics and what to watch for and how you can get involved. Oh, a question right away. Go ahead. We are. We're all four, so we're paid registered lobbyists with the state. And so our conversation today will be about sharing some of our wisdoms and tips that we've learned as a paid lobbyist. But you don't have to be a paid lobbyist. In fact, that's a beautiful thing about being involved on the local level here in Utah is that it's all about being a citizen. Our legislature is made up of citizens, and just same as you and me. So we have every right to go up. You don't need to be paid. You don't need to have to wear a lanyard with my badge just displayed, but you don't have to do that. Go ahead. That straight. Yep, it goes over holidays, over weekends, 45 days straight. They meet Monday through Friday. They typically take the weekends off. However, they are working and preparing for the next week, and we certainly are working over the weekend because that's the time where we get to catch up. Oh, we have a question in the back. Go ahead. Oh, sure. You bet. All right, so we have a couple seats down here in front if you guys want to come down. Two right over here, a couple little cluster over here. So lobbying is pretty simple. It's just going in to our legislators and convincing them that you have a good idea or that they should vote your way and things like that. And so, this is actually one of those legislative sessions that I think it's particularly powerful to be a citizen lobbyist because everything's so heightened and everyone's so energized. And so I feel like they are in a position where they're listening more to folks who are coming in. And frankly, if you were at the march last Monday, there are a lot of us. There are a lot of people, who are active and ready to take a stand and say, we're not going back. We're not doing those things. And so together, I think they're listening. And so this is a great session to become involved. Community lobbyists have existed for a long, long time. I mean, the term lobbying actually comes from the practice of standing outside the chamber. So this is actually the House chamber in our state capitol, and so the lobbyists all stand right here. This is kind of a cool place to stand. So when you pull people out when they're on the House floor time, they come out through those doors, and that's where they meet you. So that's the lobby. So when you're a lobbyist, you're standing in the lobby, pulling them out to talk to you. But our job as a lobbyist is to advocate for the issues that we're passionate about, the things that we believe in, and educate. We're educating legislators. I mean, they are folks who are sometimes teachers, sometimes they're lawyers, sometimes they're physicians, sometimes they're ranchers, farmers, housewives, or homemakers, I should say, all sorts of walks of life, and they don't know all that we know, so we're educating them and giving them some insight into the things that we have learned and know. And we participate. We have a very great legislative way that is put together, so we're in the position that we can participate and do it in a productive fashion. So it's kind of cool. So the legislative process, as we already talked about, it's 45 days straight. There's some seats down here in front if you guys want to come sit down. They begin the fourth Monday in January and then just go straight through 45 days. In Utah, the House has 75 members and the Senate holds 29. And bills can receive 3 readings on each side of the legislature. And we'll talk a little bit about the legislative process and how a bill becomes a law a little later on, but this gives you a framework anyway. And so to pass a bill, essentially it's arithmetic. You need 38 plus 15 plus 1, which means that you need 38 votes in the House, 15 votes in the Senate, and 1 vote from the governor. But there's a lot of ways to kill a bill. And unfortunately, often my work is about killing bills instead of passing bills. So we'll be talking a little bit about that and give you some strategies in that regard. But you know, the governor can either sign a bill, veto it, or allow it to become law without a signature. If the governor just leaves it alone, it becomes law automatically within 60 days. But if it's a bill that they agree with, they usually sign, or they can veto it. I don't know if you all remember back in 2012, there was a bill that was passed through the legislature that changed our sex ed statute and made it comprehensive sex ed only. And because of citizens who spoke up and said, no, we don't want that for our kids, we don't want that for our families, and petitioned and rallied. And it was led by a bus driver from Murray. And the governor listened, and he vetoed the bill. So it was remarkable to see what kind of influence you all can have. Oh, and Marina's going to take over. Come on over.
All right, maybe I'll stand over here so it's easier to pass the baton afterwards. So how does an idea become a law? This is a really important idea, I think, for you all to understand, because oftentimes a bill gets its genesis from you all. Legislators are looking to their constituents to hear ideas about the ways laws can change. If there's a problem that you may be experiencing in your life, it might be worth it to approach your legislator and say, you know, I have a great idea for a bill. I would suggest you do that outside of the legislative session. They're very busy during the 45 days that they're in session, but that's really oftentimes where a bill gets its start. Now, there are other ways as well. We know, especially with a lot of the bad bills that we are facing, my colleagues and I on the stage here, sometimes these come from national organizations and are pushed out through other states. And so sometimes we have to be on the lookout for those sorts of things as well. Here in Utah, let's talk a little bit about the process and the way that a bill makes its way through the legislative process. And please do stop me if you have any questions, because this process can get a little bit tricky, and I welcome any clarifying questions as we go. So, a bill is, you know, an idea comes from a constituent, or it comes from an interest group or something along those lines, and the legislator then takes that bill, that language, to the Office of Legislative Research, which is an office located up at the Capitol complex, staffed with a bunch of lawyers and other analysts. And those individuals are responsible for taking that idea and translating it into code language, which is oftentimes not that easy to read, I confess. But figures out where it fits in with our existing code, with our existing set of laws, and figures out the exact language. So that's really the first step. And that can happen, by the way, all throughout the year. Legislators are getting started on their legislation much earlier than when the session actually starts. So many legislators are drafting bills as early as May and getting this process started. So the bill is then introduced in either the House or the Senate. And why don't we just start with one body, and we can talk about what happens when it moves over to the other body. Because one thing you may not remember from whatever civics class you might have taken back in high school, I certainly didn't until I took this job, is that the bill really does have to make its way through both bodies, through both the House, the Senate, and then be signed by the governor before it can be enacted into law in Utah. That's not true of all states. Nebraska, for example, has a unicameral system. They just have a single body. But here in Utah, we do have two bodies. So the bill is introduced, let's say, in the House. That's called the first reading. And then the bill is sent to the Rules Committee. Now, pay attention to the Rules Committee. This is another particularity of Utah law. The Rules Committee is all-powerful. They are the gatekeepers. They make the decisions about the fate of your bill. They get to decide, do we hold on to this bill and never release it? Do we advance the bill and send it on to a standing committee where it has the opportunity to be vetted by legislators and heard by the public? They also get to decide which committee it goes to. Yes, in the back. So the question was, how do people get assigned to the committees, the standing committees and the rules committee? I'm assuming your question includes both. So that's a question that's the leadership makes those sorts of determinations. So, you know, the speaker and the other members of leadership make those all important decisions about which legislators sit on which committees. Now, if you go onto the legislative website, and I encourage all of you to do so because it's an incredible tool to use as a citizen or community lobbyist, you can find out the membership of all of the committees that we discussed today. So you can go on and see who's on the Rules Committee. And that's an important thing to find out because those people are the ones deciding what happens with bills. They meet on a regular basis and they get a list of bills every time they meet and they make decisions about which bills they're going to move on and which committees they send them to. Now, the bills are then assigned to a standing committee. And the standing committees are organized based on subject matter. So you might have Health and Human Services, you might have Transportation, Criminal Justice. These are all subject areas. And theoretically, a bill dealing with healthcare would go to Health and Human Services to be vetted by that committee. Now, I say theoretically because this is politics. And of course, there are always games that are being played. And so sometimes you will find that a bill that you think might belong in Health and Human Services actually gets sent to a different committee because, you know, perhaps the sponsor thinks it's likely to get a better shot at being advanced. So pay attention to that. Your bill may not get assigned to the location where you think it might go. So after it gets assigned to a standing committee, it receives a hearing. This is a really important thing for you all to pay attention to because the committee hearing is really the only opportunity for the public to come up, speak to a bill, make your concerns heard and recorded on the record. So as your bill moves forward and potentially becomes a law, if you testify, your position, your statement will forever be part of the history of that bill. So it's really an important moment. I think we'll talk a little bit more about committee hearings a little bit later, but generally and by law, it is required that committee assignments are posted 24 hours in advance. So you can always go onto the legislative website, and by law, 24 hours in advance, you're supposed to be able to know when your bill is going to be heard. Yes? So the question was the Bears Ears hearing, there was no announcement prior to it being heard in committee. I did indeed hear that that was the case, that there was no prior announcement, so I think that is a concern. I know that concern was registered by some of the Democrats, and so, right, they were, yeah, it's something to look into, no question. It's definitely game playing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, let's do, if you don't mind, sorry, the question was about how to do a committee hearing, how to deliver testimony in a committee hearing. Let's do wait, I have a slide on that in just a few slides, so we'll get into the nitty gritty of how you might deliver your testimony, but don't worry, I won't forget about the question. So the bill goes to the committee hearing, there's an opportunity for it to be vetted, there are questions from the committee, from the public, and if the committee decides to vote it out, the committee report is then read on the floor, and that's considered the second reading. The bill is then debated on the floor. At this point, the public is no longer involved in the process other than to observe from the gallery or from the comfort of your own home by making use of the legislative website. And you can, of course, always continue to communicate with legislators by way of text, email, those sorts of things. Yes, a question in the back. Ellie.utah.gov, absolutely. And you know, we don't have time in the course of this presentation to walk through that website, but we can certainly do so after the conclusion of this presentation. I'd be happy to walk people through it. Oh yes, sorry, there's a few more seats down in the front. If anybody needs a place to sit, feel free to come down. I see at least 5 or so. Okay, so then the bill is debated on the floor, and let's assume that everything goes our way and we get at least 38 votes in the House, and so the bill is passed and it moves on to the Senate, and this entire same process is repeated again. You go to rules first, then you go to a committee hearing, and then it's debated on the floor. And if in the Senate, the bill also receives the majority of votes, at least 15 votes in the Senate, the bill is then sent to the governor for his signature or not, and then goes into law 60 days after the legislative session.
I have a question about the third reading.
Yes.
Does that mean that it can change between the second reading and the third reading? Can the floor debate actually change the language of the bill?
So the question was, between the second and third reading, is there a difference? Can the bill actually change? And so this is actually a really complicated question to answer. The reason for that is the process I just laid out for you is really what happens in the House. The Senate has a slightly different process. So to answer your question with regard to the House, no, nothing changes with the bill. Once it comes out of the committee, it's the way it looks. When it gets to the floor, representatives can offer amendments, and so the bill can change in that way. And then it moves on. Now, in the Senate, the reason that I chose to answer this question a little bit differently is because the Senate actually has two opportunities as the entire body to vote on a bill. They vote on it first on second reading, and then they vote on it third reading. So they actually have two chances to vote on a bill. And so sometimes what you'll see on a bill, especially if a senator is sort of not sure of their position, you might listen in and hear that they say, I'm voting yes on second. And what that should signal to you is, I'm voting yes to continue with the process. I'm not sure of my yes vote. It could change to a no on third. So that's sort of a particularity of the Senate process. The House, they only have one vote, one chance, that's it. But the Senate gets two chances. Yes, in the back. Does the bill always go to the House first? No. House bills start in the House, Senate bills start in the Senate. But both, no matter where it starts, it has to make its way through both bodies. Oh, yes, yes. So the way you can tell if a bill has started in the House is that it will be labeled HB for House bill, and then a number. And in the Senate, it'll be Senate bill, and then a number. And then one more thing you should note, which is not up on this slide, but remember I said bills have to make it through both bodies, both the House and the Senate? So let's say you have a bill that goes through the House, and then it goes over to the Senate, and the Senate changes things all around. They add in amendments, things like that. Well, it can't go to the governor's desk because what made it through the House and what made it through the Senate are now different. So the bill then has to go back to the House for the House to either concur and agree with the amendments, or they can say no to the Senate. And then that gets into a whole other complicated realm, which doesn't happen very often, but essentially results in sort of a negotiation between both sides. Yes, in the striped shirt. So the question is, if it does not pass in the first body, does the second body ever get a chance to hear it? And the answer is no, unless a similar bill was also introduced in the other side. Yes, in the back. Yep, you. Sometimes, yes. Sometimes they can override. It depends on how many votes the bill got. Sometimes there's a majority, it's called a veto-proof majority. If there's enough votes that the bill got initially when it passed, it sometimes can override the governor's veto, and sometimes not. It just depends on how that vote turns out. I can't remember the exact number. Do you guys know? 3/4? Okay. Yes? Depends. So the question is, what determines if a bill is a House bill or a Senate bill? It's really who introduces the bill. So if a senator introduces a bill, it becomes a Senate bill, and if a House of Representatives member introduces it, it's a House bill. I don't think so. So the question is, are there things that can only be introduced in one body as opposed to another? And I don't believe so. I think either body is able to tackle really any subject matter. Yes?
When there are bills that we agree with, is it better to voice that agreement with the body, like say the Democrats that might be bringing it up, or be better to actually voice our disapproval of voting against it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the question, if I can paraphrase, is, what's the best way, if it's a good bill, to encourage people to vote for it? And I think we may get into that a little bit more when we talk about how to communicate with legislators, but I think it's good to reach out to everybody in that instance, even those people that we consider a done deal that they'll be voting in our way. Okay, so next slide, I think. So how to track a bill or an issue. I cannot overemphasize how important it is to familiarize yourself with le.utah.gov. I really think it's an incredible tool. In talking with other lobbyists and other folks who work with legislatures in other states, I hear time and time again that Utah's website is one of the best in terms of making the process accessible for you all to follow along, and for me. I mean, it's what I check about 1 million times a day. So get to know the website. I think that's really critical. But I think, there are over 1,000 bills that have been introduced already in the Utah legislature this session, and so it can be really hard to figure out which issues most resonate with you and which ones you want to follow and track. And so I really encourage you to find an organization that resonates with you, that you connect with, that cares about your issues, and sign up for their action alerts, because they can help to parse through the issues and direct you to things that you really care about. So I've listed some. Obviously, the ACLU of Utah, Equality Utah, Planned Parenthood, my colleagues on the stage here. But there are others, and go to their websites and make sure that you're finding out about those bills that they're tracking as well. So I mentioned the legislative website. It's not only important for figuring out the process of the legislature, but also for identifying who your legislators are. And I'm just curious, by a show of hands, how many of you know who your legislators are? That's pretty good. You've done your homework. Thank you. So if you don't know, do familiarize yourself. And you can also get to know just, some of the other important legislators, like who's the Speaker of the House, or who's on leadership or rules. These are important people who influence the process in a lot of ways. Let's see. Use the legislative tracking service. We can talk about that later if there's time, and we can go through the website. But this is an incredible service where you can go on and look at a bill, sign up for the tracking service. And there are 2 different functions. One, you can sort of keep an ongoing list on the legislative webpage of any bills you're interested in, or you can sign up and have an alert sent to you every time your bill moves through the legislative process. So it's a really great way to make sure that nothing's slipping through the cracks. Yes, in the back. Will this deck of information be made available? These slides? Absolutely. We're more than happy to make them available. Of course. And then finally, listen and watch proceedings online. This is such a great feature of the website. When the floor is debating in either the House or the Senate, you can actually go online and live stream the debates. So you can be sitting on your couch, comfy, wearing your slippers, and still feel like you're up at the Capitol and hearing what's going on in these important debates. Yes? So for the floor debates, it is live streaming, so I don't believe that it's available after the fact. It may be archived somewhere so that you can watch it after the fact, but if you want to sort of live watch a proceeding, that's something that you'll want to check the calendar on the front of the legislative webpage to find out when they're going to be on the floor. With committee hearings, those are archived, so you can listen to them after the fact. Okay. Is this mine too? Okay. So, like I said, know your legislator. Another important person to know, or at least to know how to contact him, is the governor. I find all too often with folks who are maybe, working on legislation that you're so focused on the House of Representatives and the Senate that sometimes we forget we need to think about the governor too. And especially as we see a bill gaining momentum, let's say it's a bad bill, in the back of my head, I'm always thinking, what's the backstop? The backstop is the governor. I need to be planning and lobbying the governor as well, letting him know ahead of time, this is a bad bill, here are the reasons why. And you all can do that same thing as well as you see a bad bill or a good bill moving through the process. So as I mentioned, take action when alerted by organizations. Call or meet with your legislator. I would suggest these options, especially outside of the legislative session. They're incredibly busy and don't have a lot of time, so it's going to be difficult to meet with them during the legislative session. But remember, our legislature is only 45 days. That means the rest of the year, they're back in their communities. They're accessible to you and me. You can call them and say, I'm a constituent, let's go meet, I want to talk to you about an issue. And they have a lot more time and really are there to serve you. And so that's a great opportunity to meet with them. You can write letters and emails to your legislators. You can text. Increasingly, I think that's the best way to go. Yes. No, if it's a closed meeting, there's no recording of those. I wish. Sorry, the question was whether the closed meetings have archived recordings. I don't even think they have live recordings. Yes. So the question is, does a lot of the policy making happen outside of the session and then just goes to a vote during the session? And I would say the answer is yes. A lot of the sort of heavy lifting does happen. And I think that's necessary when you have a 45-day session. I think it would be really difficult to do a lot of this work ahead of time. One thing we didn't talk about is that the legislature actually meets in what's called an interim session. They meet once a month the rest of the year. Now, they're not officially in session, so they can't take votes on bills and pass bills, but they are studying issues. And so oftentimes a bill that will pop up during the session may be one that's been heard over the summer. And it's not such a pressure situation. There's more time to sort of dig in and study the issue, and can be a great opportunity for a bill to be really vetted. Testify at committee hearings, write letters to the editor, blog. I'm gonna let Preston get into the details of how to do all of those types of communications.
So we've been talking a lot about how the legislative process works and different ways that you can get involved, but now we kind of want to give you some quick and dirty tips on how to actually engage in citizen lobby work. Citizen lobby work sounds really scary, but it's really easy, especially when you break it down into these quick, easy things you can do. The first thing that's really important to remember is to be polite. More often than not, you're going to be interfacing with folks that aren't agreeing with you on a particular issue. In fact, if you were lobbying your legislators that already agree with you, you're wasting your time. It's important to thank them for their service in voting on issues that are important to you. But you're going to want to spend the bulk of your time and efforts interfacing with folks to try to influence them in different ways. So being polite, making eye contact, and making sure you go in prepared is really important to that. Another thing that's important to remember is that your elected officials are citizens of Utah just like you. This, for me, I know in particular, was something that made lobbying less scary. Instead of seeing them as these big foreign folks up at the Capitol, just recognizing that they're everyday citizens that live in Utah, they live in your communities, and their job really is to represent you and take issues that are important to you forward. The next thing is that there's really no wrong way to lobby. When you're engaging in conversations with your lawmakers, I mean that's their job. That's what they want to hear. They want folks engaging with them so they know that they're doing their jobs and representing the people that they are supposed to be representing. The only caveat to that is to make sure that you stay on message. So it's really important if you're working with an organization that's focusing on a particular bill to go to their trainings, to follow their email blasts, because I know for all of us here, we work with national organizations that spend a lot of time and effort and money into researching messaging that really works for the folks that we're trying to influence. And a lot of the times that messaging is different than you would have the conversation in everyday life. Yeah?
I'm just wondering, I am on some of these emailing lists.
Uh-huh.
So for example, Heal Utah, they send me a thing, they say, we've already filled out this letter for you, all you have to do is send it. And so I do, and I'm like, how many, do they believe me when I send this, that I agree that I've read this information, or do I really have to rewrite the whole thing?
With form letters, the best way to, the question was, when you get an action alert from an organization and the letter's already crafted for you, is it beneficial to send it that way or to rewrite it, make it your own? And the answer really is to make it your own.
Can you just put a paragraph at the beginning to say I really read this?
I think anything that customizes the email and makes it less generic is going to make a big difference. It's more effective the most effective thing you can do is to put a personal story or some little snippet. It's me again, like why this matters to you in particular. Yeah.
Because of gerrymandering, I'm in a rock-solid Democratic district. You know, I love my representative, I love my senator. I know they agree with all the things I'm passionate about.
For sure.
Can I communicate with other legislators that, or are they just gonna say, you're not in my district, I don't care what you think?
I mean, so the question was, if you live in a district where your representatives and senators already agree with you, is it beneficial to talk to folks outside of your particular district? Yes and no. So they may sit down and listen to you, but more likely than not, they're going to take what you say with a grain of salt just because you don't live in their district. Something that's really important that you can do with that is to organize in those communities and take this information that you're learning here tonight and pass that on. There's the snowflake model of organizing where each one of you, you're only one person, but you have your 10 people that you're connected with, and you're taking this information out to them and really snowballing, organizing, and making it move forward. Yeah.
You can say, I see you're on this committee and you're considering this bill, but
Mhm.
even though you're not my representative in the House,
Absolutely.
I want you to understand how I feel about that.
Yep.
And really, they can't dispute that.
Yep.
Some websites, I've gone to websites more on the federal, but who say, you're not in my district, so they won't even take your email.
Yeah. I think the exception is committee hearings. When they're in a committee hearing, it really is open to public testimony, and they're going to listen to folks no matter where they live. Yeah.
Are you familiar with the tactics of the group Invisible, and do you think that if you are familiar, that they would work in Utah?
You know, I'm not entirely familiar. I'm sorry. I wish I could answer that question.
Repeat the question.
Oh, so the question was about a group called Indivisible here in Utah, and was related to like the efficacy of their efforts here in Utah. But unfortunately, I'm not familiar enough with that group to be able to answer. Yeah.
I find that, especially during session, a lot of these lobbying opportunities are during times when people are usually at work.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you have for folks that are kind of doing 9 to 5?
So we're going to get into a couple different ways that you can lobby. Some of them aren't necessarily in person, but lobbying throughout the year, not just during the session, is really important as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. We have oh yes. Are they available in the evenings? Yes. So the question was, a lot of the times, folks up on the Capitol are meeting during the day, 9 through 5, when a lot of folks are at work. And what are the best ways to kind of work around that and make sure that your voice is heard, even when you have other commitments? Sorry, there's a question right here.
You said that it's generally that representatives don't listen to you if you're out of their district unless they're in committee. So my experience contacting legislators in committee is that they didn't want to hear me because, and they said, you're not one of my constituents, I'm really sorry. So is there a better way than through the website, emailing them, to contact people in committee?
So the question was related to testifying in committee hearings, and there were some circumstances where if you don't live in the district in the committee hearing, they're still, saying that they don't want to listen to you because you're not their constituent, and if there are better ways to contact them. I think going to committee hearings is one of the most important things you can do. Even though they may be taking what you're saying with a grain of salt, like it's still hard to disregard that you're there and you're passionate about the issue. But yes, writing emails, making phone calls, sending text messages, contacting them in as many ways as you possibly can is going to be the best way to have like the most impact.
So at the federal level, for example, on the health committee, there's 12 senators representing 50 states.
Mm-hmm.
So if this was a senator from South Carolina, if everybody responds that way, then there are only 12 states
Yeah.
So her question was that at the federal level, for example, in one committee that this woman reached out to, there were only 12 senators representing all 50 states. And if they weren't listening to anybody but their constituents, essentially they were only representing 12 states. And I think the model is similar also here when a bill is being heard in committee. It has not been my experience that legislators just totally dismiss people who are outside of their district when they're hearing a bill in committee, because it's sort of understood that that's the vetting process. Those are the only people potentially that may ever hear a bill if it dies in committee. So I think it's worth it to reach out to people even at that stage. I do, absolutely. And it's maybe even worth it to reach out to people on rules when you see that a bill hasn't been assigned to a committee yet. You won't know exactly the schedule when something is advancing, but you can certainly reach out to legislators and say, hey, I'm interested in this bill. I really hope it makes it out of rules, and I hope it makes it to this committee, for example. So I think those are both important places to make your voice heard, regardless of whether they actually represent you. Now, when it gets to the floor, I think that legislators are probably doing a couple of different tallies. I think they're doing a tally of how many emails, texts, calls they get in general. Then they're looking to see how many are their constituents. And then, unfortunately, I think they're also looking for form letters, and they sort of give those less weight than the other sort of more personalized ones. And then the final thing I would say is I'm hearing from legislators right now that it's hard to answer the phone. So I would definitely not recommend that model. It absolutely works at the federal level. It's what I do when I call on federal issues. At the state level, it does not work. They don't have staff. They don't have people to answer their phones, and it just fills up their voicemail, and they're sitting on the floor oftentimes in committees, so they can't actually pick up their phone. So I would definitely recommend email or text.
Thank you. Yeah. So the le.utah.gov website has all of their contact information. 90% of the lawmakers that 90% of them will have their cell phone number up. And you can also, if they don't have their cell phone number on the website, send them an email. If you talk to them on the phone, ask them how they feel about text messaging. And in my experience, most of them are like, yes, I love texts. I can get to them when I have time, and they'll probably give you their cell phone number. I didn't paraphrase the question. The question was, how do you you get the lawmakers' cell phone numbers? Yeah. I'm sorry, what was the question one more time? Are the committee members only doing their research or hearing during the 45-day legislative session, regardless of the amount of time since it's been introduced? Yes, yes. So the question was, are legislators in committees only during that 45-day period? And the answer is yes. Yeah.
Than worrying about the legal definitions or precedent or anything. Do I need to have more of an understanding of that kind of precedent when I'm going in to address concerns about something that I know is directly impacting my child? And then also, I'm doing the same thing now. I usually have more than one concern to address a day.
For sure. For sure. So a couple questions in there. One was, do you need to understand the legal ramifications and the technicalities of a bill to talk about them? And then how do you address multiple issues at the same time, like I'm sure many of us want to do? Run for office. Yes. Yes and no. It's important to understand some of the basics of the bill, and working with an organization, we give out talking points, and we talk about some of we help folks understand the legal ramifications at a really basic level so they know what they're talking about. But the most important thing you can do is to talk about the issue as a concerned parent, as a concerned citizen, or the ways that it will impact you. And to answer your second question in regards to how do you talk to legislators about multiple issues, separate phone calls, separate conversations, separate letters, contact them over and over and over again. Don't be worried about over contacting them, but make sure you only talk about one issue at a time. That way, at the end of the conversation, you can let them know very clearly what you expect them to do or how you expect them to vote. And it's not this wonky conversation of, oh, I think she wanted me to vote this way on this, but I'm not really sure, so it's just really clear. Last question, yeah.
From the Women's March on the Capitol, what impact do you think that had? I mean, they kind of complained about the noise in the Capitol building, and then some representatives like took to their blogs and mocked the hats and stuff. Does that really have any sway, or what do you think that really demonstrates? How do we really translate that into capitalize on that momentum and translate that into votes, into action?
So the question is, with the Women's March and other marches and rallies that happen, how do we capitalize on that momentum, and do those marches actually, have any benefit? That's kind of a complicated question. I think that the show of solidarity is really important, and there's obviously strength in numbers, and our lawmakers can't deny seeing all of these folks up at the Capitol. But I think that one of the most important things that comes from marches and rallies is community building and base building. And if we can harness that energy and that momentum and get folks to come to trainings like this and take it one step further and have that individualized one-on-one conversation with their lawmakers, that's one of the greatest things that can come out of it. Yeah.
So I just want to say, too, in response specifically to the Utah March, I am hearing from legislators and other folks up at the Capitol about how impressive it was. People saying they've never seen anything like that. I myself have been up at the Capitol for 10 years now. I have never seen that many people in the Capitol. It was incredible. So that did not go unnoticed. Yes, there are always going to be a few people who mock and make light of it, but people noticed that you all are paying attention, and I am already seeing the action on bills, people calling in and texting and emailing in ways that they haven't before. I think these legislators are on notice that we're not asleep at the wheel. We're paying attention, and they need to hear our voice. So I think it was huge.
I just want to say that Todd Weiler, who is one of the most conservative Republicans on Capitol Hill, during the march, he tweeted out, "That is the sound of freedom." So you know that you're having an impact. Don't ever doubt that.
So like Marina kind of talked about a little bit, the phone call is a good method to communicate with your lawmakers, but it's most effective outside of the session. During the 45-day session we have, they're extremely busy. They're on the floor a lot. More often than not, they're not going to be able to answer the phone, and very few of them actually have interns that can help take those calls and make that an efficient process. Yeah. Yeah. For sure. So yeah, a lot of the times folks behind organizing marches and rallies will create Facebook pages, websites that give you additional steps to take. So beyond just going to that march, following them on Facebook, looking at their websites, and making sure you take those additional steps. So another time where phone calls can be really useful is right before committee hearings. If you're at work, can't make it to that committee hearing, or you just watch the live stream from home, calling your lawmakers to let them know that you were watching how they voted, or encouraging them to vote one way or the other. Again, it's really hit or miss, so it's not the best way to get in touch with folks, but it is a way. It's also important before you have these phone calls to write out a script or a couple talking points that you want to hit on, because I mean, it's really easy to get off track, and because I know so many of us are concerned about so many different issues, it's easy to start talking about more than one, but if you write that out, it's easier to focus. Yeah.
So I just want to ask about the question at the state versus the federal level.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'd like to say that a lot of people here were calling Hatch and as they still voted opposite of what the majority of their constituents asked them to. I think they've gotten more Facebook hits and phone calls and emails than we've ever had before.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, how do we make them listen to us? Other than annoying them. They've been taking their Facebook post down for a while, but stop posting. Hatch it.
So the question was, how do we make our lawmakers, particularly at the federal level, listen to us and make and recognize us as, you know, constituents? Voting them out, showing up to the polls. This is huge. Donate to their opponent. Volunteer for their opponents. Doing canvassing, making phone calls, doing some of the hard groundwork.
Yeah, one thing I was going to say too is I wonder, this is just my theory, I don't know if it's true or not, but maybe these folks, it's the first time they've ever heard from this many people, right? I mean, presumably it is. So I think we keep the pressure on, right? And say, we're not going away. You didn't listen that time, but guess what? We're going to be here every time. And maybe, you know, the next time they'll have to listen. I just have to guess that maybe here in Utah, they haven't heard from a lot of us before because we thought, you know, it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah.
I think that one problem that we also have is that when we feel like we are offended,
Mm-hmm.
we shut down the conversation, which then kind of builds the pressure in the opponent's corner. And I think what that also does is turn people off to our message, which is typically Democrat. And I think that's the biggest thing that us as Democrats, what we can do is inspire the unlikely voters. If you want to see a change,
For sure.
get the millennials. Don't just disparage them. Get the millennials, get the kids who are just turning 18. The kids who are 16 now are 18 in 2018 to vote. You know, if you have kids that are in high school, you know, find out if there are civics classes where they allow us to go in and speak at their classes. I'm an Army vet. You know, I'd love to tell about my war experience. If you holy cow, get them involved and invited and inspired. That when they are inspired to vote, they'll vote. When they feel like they do need, then they'll likely stay home.
For sure. Yeah, it is important to recognize that you're going to be interfacing with folks who probably don't agree with you, and it's really important to be respectful in having those conversations and not shutting down and staying on message. Yeah.
Staying on message, and I talk loud. I said to my daughter today, who's 16, I said, Mom's going to learn about lobbying tonight. And she said, we're studying that in AP Government. And I said, share it with your class, tell their parents to come.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you. Yeah.
So, yeah, we can say that we can vote them out, but gerrymandering is a huge issue. I don't understand how can we get the people who already have the power to make it so that they won't have the power next election? This seems very unlikely.
For sure. Do you want to?
This is the biggest problem we have in Utah right now, and it is. What's that? Is it, porn. I'm sorry. Porn is the public health crisis. I forgot. But number two is gerrymandering. How frustrating is it that here in the capital city we have Chris Stewart and Rob Bishop? These two characters could not get elected in the city of Salt Lake. We have no representation in the federal government. Okay? All right? This is a huge problem. Every 10 years there is a census and the legislature goes and rewrites the map, the maps, the districts. And sadly, and I'm not seeing it yet, at the 2010 census, there was this Fair Boundaries movement, and there was a lot of energy trying to get a ballot initiative and a lot of things happening, and we failed then. And we are 3 years away from the census again, and there is no organized political movement right now in Utah to address this issue. Yep. Lawsuits? Is that? I'm glad to hear it. So, whatever you can do to support those efforts is critical, whether it's supporting an organization that's suing. What's that? Who's working on it? UACT, Utah? Yep. What's the website again? UtahnsActingForChangeTogether.com? UACT. Facebook. Okay, all right, good. Excellent. So that is the issue, folks. That's the toughest thing. Yep. Yep. Donuts versus pizza. Yep. People don't like to give up power. That's it. And they have power with the pizza. So all right. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
He will. He'll come.
Both, yep. As many ways as you can get in touch with folks.
Yeah, outside of the session. I think that's the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think your question is how do you get in touch with lawmakers and talk to them about issues when there isn't a bill number attached to it, so outside of the session. Well, I think you can talk about things in more conceptual nature outside of the session. Like, you know, Todd Weiler, here are things that I care about. I care about the fact that our air is really dirty. What are you gonna do about that? Can we talk about possible legislation? Or I'm really concerned that all you can talk about is porn. Can we talk about something else? So, I think you just bring it to bigger levels outside the legislative session. And as I said at the beginning, maybe you bring him a bill. You say, look, I've noticed this problem in our community. I'm troubled by it. Will you run my bill for me?
So I know there are a lot more questions, and I want to hold that we're going to have some space at the end. Towards the end of the training, we're going to talk about issues that our organizations are focusing on, and hopefully break into some groups that we can talk more closely about those issues and ways to lobby. So I'm going to quickly move on through the next slide. We've talked about this a lot already. but just to touch on a couple things that I think are important. It's always important when you're engaging with your legislators to state your name and make it very clear that you're a constituent. If it's in an email or a text message, if it's the first time you're contacting them, giving your address or something that shows that you live in their neighborhood, just to legitimize yourself is really important. Again, covering one subject per email. If you care about more than one issue, which I'm sure almost, if not all of you do, write separate emails. Again, contact them again and again and again. Make yourself clear. If the issue can be identified by a bill number and a name, make sure you include that in the subject line of your email. That helps to call attention to it and can oftentimes get you a response quicker. Making it personal, describing how that legislation impacts you, talking about your own experience, and then requesting a reply. A lot of the times if you don't ask for a reply, they won't write you back. It depends on the particular legislator, but requesting a reply never hurts. And then continuing to write your legislator as the bill moves through the process. Like we talked about before, there are lots of ways a bill can die. It has to go through lots of votes, lots of committees. So making where you stand very clear through every step of the process is really important.
Okay, so this is getting back to the question somebody asked about earlier about participating in committee hearings. And I think this is really important because this is when you all, I know, I'm going to see all of you up in committee hearings this next several weeks. So it's actually sort of a totally informal process in some ways. Don't be intimidated by it. I'm going to walk you through the steps so that it doesn't feel scary. What happens is that we talked about before, agendas are posted 24 hours in advance. So you'll want to go onto the legislative website and track your bill, and you'll see there are a couple different places where committee agendas are posted, but you'll want to keep track of your bill. And if you sign up for email tracking, you'll actually get an email alert letting you know when it's assigned to committee. You'll want to look at that agenda for a couple of things. You're going to want to look at which committee it is, and then you want to pay attention, of course, to which members are sitting on that committee, so which legislators are going to be there listening to you. And it's sometimes not a bad idea to get in touch with them ahead of time. Do a little bit of homework and maybe send them an email, say, I'm going to be in your committee, I'm going to testify on this bill, I want you to know this is what I care about. So you're going to also want to pay attention to the location of the committee room. And when you get up to the Capitol, you can always ask. There's some, police officers that are all throughout the Capitol and other folks who are there to help guide the public around. You can always approach them and ask if you're having trouble finding the location of your committee room. I think there are also maps located both in the Capitol as well as online, so you can consult those as well. And then you're also going to want to look at the time that your bill has been scheduled for. So a committee might run from 2 to 5, for example. But you'll want to look and see which number your bill is. If it's number 3 on the agenda, that means it'll be heard third, usually. I say usually because things get mixed around up there. It may be that the person who's supposed to present number 1 is running late, and so they'll move on to 2. So that can be a little bit frustrating if you're a member of the public and you've taken time out of your day to come up. But it just happens, and that's just one of sort of the inconveniences of our system. Yes, in the back. You do, and I'll tell you how that happens, but you don't have to sign up in advance. The question was, do you have to sign up to testify? So then your bill gets heard. Let's say it's number 3 and they're moving right along with their agenda and your bill gets called. Here is what will happen. The bill sponsor will approach the front table and will present the bill. He'll tell the members of the committee what's in the bill, what it does. Sometimes he or she will be accompanied by a member of the public or some sort of expert that can help explain the bill in further detail. If you go up to the Capitol and watch these hearings, you may be surprised the number of times when a legislator doesn't seem to understand his or her bill that well, and they really need the expertise of the person next to them. So when that process is over and they've presented the bill, then the committee members who are sitting sort of in an elevated dais above them will ask questions of the bill sponsor and perhaps the expert as well, and there'll be sort of a debate back and forth between legislators about the subject of the bill. Then, before a vote happens, the chairman or chairwoman of the committee will ask if there is anybody in the public who wishes to speak to the bill. And this is the really formal part, okay? You raise your hand. That's all you do. And the chairperson will look and see how many people are there. And some chair people do things differently. There are some people who will let absolutely everybody speak. Sometimes there are a lot of people who want to speak on a bill. I had a bill like that happen this afternoon. There were probably 10 people who raised their hands, and there was a packed agenda. And so the chair in our committee said, okay, I'm going to limit it to these people. Sometimes they will say, who's here for the bill, who's here against the bill. Sometimes they'll say, I'll give you 2 minutes, that's it. And this is the reason that we list here, prepare your testimony ahead of time, because you may only get 2 or 3 minutes, and it's best to make sure that you're putting what's most important down in writing, that it's concise, that you're making sure you're getting all your important points in, because you may get cut off after 120 seconds, which is kind of crazy. So that's essentially the entire process. The one other thing I would say, and don't be scared about this, but if you go up and give testimony, it's possible that the legislators may ask a question of you. Something that you say may spark their interest or their curiosity, and they have the right to do that, so they can ask you to stay so that they can ask you a question. It is always okay to say you don't know, obviously. So if it's something that you're not comfortable answering or you don't know the answer, please just say, I don't know, and then you can go and sit down. The only other sort of procedural item is they will ask you to both write your name on the register that's sitting in front of you, and also to say your name, and if you represent anybody, into the mic before you start speaking. And the purpose of that is that, as I mentioned before, the audio is being streamed so that people at home can listen, and so it's really important that you identify yourselves so that people who are listening back at home know which voice belongs to which person. Yes? Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is sort of a question about what's the best way, and sort of a particular question about this woman's son who might be sort of disruptive to the committee, I guess is your question, or you're worried that might disrupt? So, I mean, the committee rooms are small usually, and it's perfectly fine to wait outside until it's time to come in if you're worried about that. Not knowing your son, I don't know, but there are lots of people in these committee rooms, and there's often lots of activity going on, so I don't think you necessarily have to do that. But if you're concerned about it, you could certainly wait. There are always chairs right outside, and then have somebody call you in when it's time to come in and when your bill is being addressed. Yes, in the back. Yeah, sorry. So the question was, if you've never been up there and you're a member of the public giving testimony, what's going to happen? Are the legislators going to be nice, or what if they disagree with you? They might. I mean, I wish I could tell you they will always be nice. It really depends on the legislator. The vast majority of the legislators that I work with are respectful and understand that you are taking time out of your day to come up there, that you are a member of the public, that they serve you. But that is not all legislators, and I have seen that. I saw it just a few days ago. A doctor came up to testify, and there was a legislator who, quite frankly, was rude to her. So get your thick skin on and realize that they may not agree with you, and they may be rude, but most of the time they're not. And I think I take great comfort, at least, in knowing that when I'm advocating for my position and for something I believe in, that I know I'm on the right side of the issue, and it doesn't matter how they treat me, that I'm better than that. So, sorry, not the most reassuring answer. Yeah. Yes, sorry. So the question is it better to have anecdotal or empirical testimony? I think it depends on which hat you're wearing when you deliver that testimony. I'm a firm believer in, a personal story is always really persuasive and has the capability to move people. And especially when you can touch on something emotional or sort of connect with the legislator on a personal level. If you happen to have a certain expertise, then absolutely, I think sometimes that empirical information can be helpful if you're, let's say, a doctor and you want to give your advice from the perspective of a medical professional, then I think that absolutely makes sense. So it just sort of depends on which hat you're wearing.
So I work in medical research, so I'm a total science nerd, but we still live in a very deep theocratic state. So that in itself is anecdotal. So wouldn't it be better if we do have that expertise to bring up the facts and then make it more poignant with an anecdote?
Yeah, so the question was, is it good to bring up facts and then make it more poignant with an anecdote? And I think absolutely. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do this necessarily. Sometimes you're just reading the committee members. I mean, I do that myself. I prepare testimony a lot of times on bills, but sometimes I'm waiting to see what happens. And if somebody brings up a point, I'll weave that into my comments. There's a little bit of this that you're doing on the fly. And I think if you are going to testify on a bill, it's not a bad thing to show up a little bit early and watch how the proceedings go. That might give you a sense of, okay, who are the jerks on this committee? Who do I need to watch out for? What sort of arguments are people bringing up with? Because that might help me tailor my comments to make it more receptive by this committee. Yeah. So the question is, are you allowed to address a specific committee member when you're testifying? I wouldn't recommend that. I think it's better always. I always begin my testimony saying, Mr. or Mrs. Chairperson and members of the committee, and then I introduce myself. Now, in your testimony, if you notice that, let's say, Representative Perry brought up a particular point, you may mention that and say, I think it's really interesting. Representative Perry brought up that this speeding bill is really going to cause all these accidents. I think that's really important and mirrors what I've seen in my own life. So you might want to bring it up in that sort of way, but you want to address your comments to the entire committee. Yeah.
So sort of a weird question, but I mean this applies to a lot of especially transgender friends and family that I have. When asked for your name, are you required to give your current legal name, or can you use your common use name?
So the question is, what name can you give when you are identifying yourself before a committee? Do you have to give your legal name or the name that you typically use? You can give whatever name you want. Nobody's going to check that. So just what you're comfortable with. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, what sort of questions might you receive back? I'm sorry, say that again? Are they trying to establish your credibility? It really just depends on the legislators and, your testimony. Sometimes it could be that they really are curious and something that you've said sparks their interest and they feel like they need to follow up. There are some legislators who are jerks and will ask questions for the purpose of trying to demonstrate that they're superior, no question. But I think those are generally few and far between, and if you're being asked a question, it's usually because something you said in your testimony has made them question something else. So it could be, if you've listed a bunch of facts, maybe they want to know where those facts come from, or, something like that. Yeah. So the question was, should you have multiple frameworks in how you prepare your testimony? Let's say it's a clean air issue. Do you want to maybe frame it in terms of fiscal issues rather than, health issues? I think I do that all the time when I'm looking at the legislators I'm testifying in front of. I'm often thinking about what issues are going to resonate with them. What do they care about? Just today, I was preparing to testify on a bill related to this Good Landlord program, and I was communicating with legislators, reminding them, big government, you guys don't like big government. Remember, you don't want the state telling landlords what they can and can't do. So oftentimes, I think it makes sense to tailor your message and sort of use some of these conservative sound bites. Okay, maybe one more question and then we'll move on. Yeah. So the So the question is, if you have serious misgivings about a bill, can you phrase your testimony in terms of questions? So I guess two answers. Members of the public are not technically allowed to seek answers from legislators in this particular forum. You can rhetorically ask those questions, of course, as part of your testimony, but yeah, it would not be, I've seen that happen sometimes. People come up and try to ask questions of legislators, and typically what happens is the chair will rein that in and say that that's not appropriate, so. You could just say, yeah, I really like this bill, or no, I really hate it. I think it's far more persuasive to be able to tell legislators why. But, right, so sometimes it's important to test, I don't know if this is exactly answering your question, but sometimes it is important to testify on a bill even when you know the outcome and when you know the outcome is against you. And I think it's important for the reason of establishing a position, establishing that there was opposition. As I mentioned before, bills have a legislative history that follows along with them. And it's important that we register our opposition and that become part of the legislative history of a piece of legislation. And it can be used in a variety of ways. Sometimes litigation will follow, and sometimes courts will take a look at, what did this hearing look like? What was the intent? How do we figure out what the legislature was grappling with? So you'd be surprised. There are lots of ways in which that's important. The other important reason sometimes to go up and register your opinion is because there's a public education component that happens as well. Especially if it's a controversial issue, the media will be there. And they'll be filming, and that's a great way to get your personal experience with an issue broadcast to the larger audience in the state. And to make sure that they're not just, hearing, oh, this bill passed, but that there was a room full of people who all raised their hand to say they wanted to speak, that they really objected to porn being the biggest crisis in Utah. Of course, it's actually air. So I think it's really important to testify regardless. Okay, what is the next one? Oh, yes. So another way that you can actually have physical interaction in a proper way with your legislators, sorry, is by going up. Heather started us out talking about the lobby, that area out in front of both the House floor and the Senate floor. And she mentioned that that's where all the lobbyists hang out and the legislators sort of come in and out as they're voting on bills. And that's a great place for you to hang out as well. What you want to do is you want to go onto the legislative website and find out when legislators are having floor time. This week, it's actually pretty limited. It's between 11 and 12:15 that they're on the floor. And that's because we're just at the beginning of the session, so there's not a lot of bills for them to be debating. As the session moves on, you'll find there's more and more floor time, so it'll be easier for you to pull your legislator out during those times. And you can take these little notes. This is, again, sort of like in committee when you raise your hand. It feels like you're in school. This is another time when it feels like you're in school. There are these little notes that are up at the Capitol, out in front of the House and the Senate. And in the House, they're green. And you have these lovely gentlemen who are retired Utah Highway Patrol guys, and they wear green jackets in front of the House. Over in the Senate, they wear sort of grayish blue jackets. And there are blue notes. And we brought a couple of these so you can see them and get used to what they look like and how to use them. You basically just fill out this information, the date, and who you're wishing to speak with. You put your name, and if you're with an organization, you mention that. If you're not with an organization, you can mention, I'm a constituent. And then you can check that I'm waiting to see you, and you list your location if you're in front of the center doors or the north doors or the south doors, and you can always ask for assistance in how to let your legislator know which location you're at. It's helpful to put your phone number so that they can call you if they're not able to come out, and then put a little message like, hi, I'm Marina. I'm your constituent. I'm here to see you. I'm up at the Capitol today. I took time off work. I'm really interested in this issue. Can you please come out and chat with me? And then you take your little note to these lovely gentlemen in green or blue, and they will stamp it and then take it inside to the floor and deliver it to your legislator. Now, they don't always come out, and sometimes they can't come out if they're busy, voting on a particular bill or having a really heated debate on a bill that they care about. They may not be able to come out right away. But oftentimes they do come out when they're finished voting, and they'll call out your name if they don't know you, or you can list some identifying information, like I'm the one wearing the red shirt or something like that. And they'll come out and meet with you, and you can have a few moments. It's not going to be long, of course, because they're going to be distracted and know that they have other bills that they have to work on. But it's a great way during the session to actually have face-to-face contact with your legislator. And I think it sends an incredible message to your legislator that you took time out of your day. Maybe you took time off work. Maybe you had to arrange for childcare for your children to be there. But you're letting them know that you took that step of coming up to the Capitol, which is not easy, to let them know about something that you care about. Yeah, in the back. Yep. Yeah, so the question was, instead of asking them to come out, can you also just give them some direction? Like, hey, I'd really like you to support this amendment. You can absolutely do that. You can also sometimes attach materials. It depends. You'll have to get approval from these green coat guys, but sometimes you can attach materials as well if you have something. Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. I think so, yeah. So the question was, can you be effective also by saying, I know you're busy, if you don't have time to come out right now, can you text me or get in touch with me some other way? I think so, absolutely. Yes. Yes.
I just want to say that this is amazing, but the other question is, are there any news organizations here tonight covering this?
I don't know. Anybody in the news? No, it looks like not. Yeah. I'm sorry? You don't have to be a constituent to send in a note. I think it helps, but you don't have to be a constituent. No, absolutely not. Yeah. That's a great idea. Yeah. So the suggestion was take out your phones and take a picture of everybody here and maybe tag your legislator and let them know that you're here learning and that you may be in contact very soon. Great suggestion. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah. So the question was, some of the photos that we've taken, can they be accessible? Absolutely. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Is it like, would this be a tactic to go and pull people out of session to sort of like
Stall things.
like come and talk and then like have a bunch of people pull people out of session, or is that like
So the question was, could you use this as a tactic to sort of annoy legislators, like pulling them out repeatedly? I mean, they may not come out. They may sort of get savvy to what you're doing and not choose to come out. There was a question down front about whether they will come if you're not your constituent. I think they're more likely to come if you're their constituent, or if you have like a particular perspective. We didn't talk about this before, but I once had a legislator tell me that I think actually Heather mentioned that like sometimes these legislators are, ranchers or farmers or doctors or whatever, and they don't necessarily have the expertise to understand all 1,000 bills that are coming before them. And I had a legislator once tell me that like he knew nothing about water issues. And there were all these water bills. And somebody in his district reached out and was like an expert in water and said, I'm really concerned about this bill. And they developed this relationship whereby the legislator sort of ran a lot of bills past this constituent because he had expertise in this particular subject area. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but even if you're not a constituent, maybe you have a particular subject matter expertise that you can put down on the note and say, look, I really understand this issue. I know you're debating this bill later today. I'd love to give you my perspective. Okay, So a few other ways to lobby. I want to be mindful of your time. Just remember that being a lobbyist also is more than just coming up to the Capitol or communicating with your legislator. Increasingly in these dark times, my sort of personal feelings about all of this is trying to influence things in my own little sphere. I'm in the process of doing this home renovation, and I'm not sure that my tile guy and my cabinet guy really want to hear my political rants, but I feel like they're a captive audience. Exactly. So, I keep it friendly and light, but I just inject a few of these things into the people with whom I'm interacting on a daily basis. And I would encourage you to do that. You don't have to talk to the people working in your, doing your tile work or whatever, but maybe you communicate with friends, or maybe you have a personal blog, or are active on Facebook or social media. And these are all ways to sort of spread the word about things that you care about and have influence in that sort of snowflake manner that Preston mentioned. Yeah.
On that note, I imagine we're all from Salt Lake City, and we're inundated with the votes of rural Utah. And I love rural Utah, but I don't vote with them.
Mm-hmm.
I would want to reach out to them. Do you have any suggestions? Like if you're in rural Utah and you're afraid your bumper stickers are going to get you murdered, or how do we help those people and show them that our interests are often the same? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? So the question was how to connect with people with whom we aren't sure that we necessarily have shared values, who might live in rural parts of the state. I guess I don't know entirely if I have the answer to that question, but so many of the legislators that I work with do come from those sorts of areas, and I don't feel like I have a lot in common with them. And I just try to always find something. You can go to their bio pages on the webpage and like maybe you find out where they graduated from, or which activities they're interested in, or who their wife is or husband, or even these little things. Maybe you can figure out that your kids go to the same school, or just some human way to connect to start that conversation. I always tell people that a couple of years ago I was boarding a plane, and I had my two small children with me in my stroller, and was struggling to get on the plane, and Jason Chaffetz, of all people, I know, this is before he got bad, helped me get my stroller on the plane. And it was just like one nice moment ever. And, I remind him of that when I see him. It's just like hey, remember you helped, yeah, remember you were nice once? So, sometimes it's just looking for those really basic ways to connect so that you have that trust there to maybe go a little deeper into some other issues afterwards. I think it's establishing trust. That's what I've learned in my sort of relationships with legislators over the years, is really trying to get that understanding that they trust me and I trust them, so that I can then bring them information. Do you guys have other thoughts? I don't know.
I was just going to say that the thing that I've learned has been sharing stories, and that, like you said, we do, the things that we value and share are more than where we differ. And so it's almost always the people I talk to, the legislators I talk to, there's always some sort of shared story or value or situation that resonates between the two of us. And so I always try to look at that. I do my research as well. I always look at and see if there's something that I know about their past or their family that I could hit on. But even just my personal life experience, it seems like there's always something that people connect with, and there's a connection, and then you build trust on that. But it's story sharing and telling people about your life and your experience, because, you can't disagree with that, and it's something that we all have, that shared experience and that common space of being human. So that's where I go.
And have some fun with them, too. I had this experience. I'm kind of a gay missionary now, and so I'm always doing outreach. I'm always doing outreach, and so we go to Republican events, a lot as well. And so I went to this Republican fundraiser thing, and it was a talent show, and Mia Love was there. And it was my first time meeting Mia Love, and the talent show was horrific, okay? So I go up to Mia Love and I'm like, you Republicans have got to stop running black and gay people out of your party because you're suffering bad. And she's like, I know, you know. So, you know, have some fun with them. I flirt with Todd Weiler all the time. And I think he likes it. But you've got to have a joyful experience, because when you break it down with some humor and they're laughing, then all their defenses go down, and then you can have a real conversation. And I also, you know, I was having dinner with Deidre Henderson, and she's from like Mapleton, I think, or somewhere in Utah County. And I'm like, what am I going to talk to with Senator Henderson? I'm like, my mission. And I went right there and I talked about being a Mormon missionary, and all of a sudden she's like, oh, you're not just this crazy gay kid. You're someone who comes from the same culture as I do. And then all of a sudden there was a dialogue that we could have together. So finding that common ground is essential. There, yes. I know it's hard. It's a discipline. It is a discipline. You have to sort of practice, you know, sort of pulling it together. But sometimes it's okay to, you know, let emotion out a little bit, especially if something really hurts you or makes you sad. You know, be able to express the kind of pain that you're experiencing, I think is valuable. So yes, right there. Yeah, you right there, back here. Check it. Yeah. Yeah. They're sincere in their beliefs. The opposition is always sincere in their beliefs. That's absolutely true. Yes, way back there, jumping up.
Good tip.
Good. Okay, we're moving along. We have issues we got to get to as well. Oh, okay, good. Way up there. Yeah. Love him. Yeah. Well, this is the problem when we're in our little sort of ideological bubbles, is that we don't often interact with people who have different political, except our family, right? People who have different political backgrounds. So that's why, for something like Equality Utah, we always show up to the Republican State Convention, because that's where I can run into Chris Stewart. And that's where I can run into Jason Chaffetz and introduce myself. And it's, you know, it's a little bit difficult, but sometimes you guys sort of get out of your little bubble and actually. No. Where's your bubble? You're in their bubble? But how often do you run into them? You have to be where they are. That's what I'm saying. You are there. You are there. You are outside of our bubble here. That's right. But you know, you've got to sort of find them and go to. I mean, that's what I do. I go to the events where I know they're going to be.
I'll just say, you know, I mean, one thing that we were talking about collectively, the three of us, when we were talking about tonight, is that, you know, the purpose of this meeting really is to talk especially about what's happening at the state level. And I increasingly feel like at a time when we can't count on the federal government to have good protections in place, we especially need to turn our attention to the state issues. This is where most of the laws are going to get passed that actually impact our lives. And the thing that I think is different now is that people are going to pay attention. You all took time out of your night to come and sit through a lobby training. That's different. You know, I have been doing this for 10 years now, lobbying at the Capitol, and most of my friends pay no attention. They just know they won't see me for 7 weeks. They don't read the newspaper. They don't want to hear about what issues I'm working on. This year's different. People are asking me, and they're asking, how can I get in touch with my legislators? How can I let them know that I care? So I think that is the way. I think this is the beginning. You all are showing up. You are interested in these issues. You are dedicated to communicating with your legislators and letting them know that you're not going away. And to me, that is the best way for us to make impact. Obviously, we need to do it at the federal level as well, and that's going to take numbers. I think that's where sheer numbers matter. But even here locally, numbers matter. Sometimes it's as much as 10 phone calls, 10 texts that can make a difference and let legislators know that we're paying attention. Right, right. I don't know if I have an answer to that, but I think it's an incredibly valid point, and I'm really glad you raised it. And, you know, I heard some of that criticism after I went to the DC March and heard, you know, I think it was easy for a lot of conservatives to sort of write off people who showed up saying, like, what are you worried about? You can vote, you can do all these things. Why are you marching? And the answer really was, I march on behalf of those who can't. But I think your point is valid, and you know, I heard some criticism about the timing of the Utah March, that it could have been done at a different time so that more people could have been able to go up and perhaps work around school and work hours. And I think those are absolutely things that we need to be mindful of and remember that we need to be a community that looks different than just, you know, a bunch of white privileged people. Absolutely.
I just want to address, you know, the idea of change and how we make change happen. And I think I'll just pull from my own movement, which is the LGBTQ movement. 40 years ago, we were having our asses kicked in bars, and we were being arrested, and we were being hauled away, and we have been experienced one of the fastest moving social justice movements ever. All right, and here in Utah, I always brag about this because we were the first red state to overturn a gay marriage ban, and it happened in Utah. And we are the only state, yeah, you should give yourself credit for that, okay? We are the only Republican-controlled legislature that has ever passed a pro-LGBTQ bill, and we did it 2 years ago. And that was our non-discrimination effort. The only Republican state in the entire country to ever have done that happened here in Utah because of you. Now, that took 7 years, all right? 7 years of us going up to Capitol Hill and them telling us no. And we wrote and we lobbied and we pulled them out. And I and a few others got arrested, okay, fighting for this bill, all right? And so you have got to know that you have this political power, and yes, it is so damn frustrating because things seem so dire, and the climate is at risk, and refugees and immigrants are at risk, our families, our reproductive rights are at risk. Yeah, you should be scared as shitless, all right? But don't be so scared that you just throw your hands up and go, I can't do anything. All right? We are going to create the change. It is happening now. It's slow, okay? Day to day it's slow. But this movement is happening around the world. So I just want you to stay engaged in a big way. Yeah. Yes, yes.
When we're speaking to our local, state representatives, is it possible to get them to influence the federal representatives?
That's a good question, actually. Anyone want to tackle that?
I think so. I mean, I feel like, the question, I get that. Can we ask our state representatives to influence our congressional delegation? And I would say the answer is yes. I mean, it seems as if they work from a similar, if not the same, playbook. I mean, you see a lot of the same issues coming up on the federal level and on the state level. There's a lot, I mean, our congressional delegation comes and speaks to the legislature every year, each of them, and comes and gives a speech, and they all cheer and whatnot. So I have to believe that it goes both ways, that our congressional delegation looks to our legislature and takes some guidance from them on issues having to do with, whatever issues are on the docket. And did you say you had it?
I was just going to say, sometimes they go back and forth. It's like JV and varsity a little bit too. Jason Chaffetz worked up at the Utah State Capitol at one point too. So I think there's definitely that connection. And Senator Henderson that Troy mentioned a few moments ago, she once worked for Jason Chaffetz. So there's a lot of those relationships in sort of the small political world. If you have a good relationship with your legislator, it's worth letting them know of your concerns at the federal level, especially if it happens to be a Republican legislator. I think that really matters.
Yeah, waving your hand right there. What? You just bring your body there. That is also so important for them to see the numbers.
And when a bill's being heard on the floor, you can go up in the gallery and pack the gallery.
Feel it, yeah. Oh my gosh, right there.
Just by point of information, Jason Chaffetz is having a town hall meeting at the Cottonwood Heights on, it's moved to Brighton High School because they anticipated a much larger crowd, so it's Brighton High School's auditorium.
Okay, all right, so who's going? Who's going? All right, okay, good. Awesome, excellent. Good. All right, yes, right there. Okay, all right. All right, let's bring it back down. Thanks. The question is, what can we do to slow down the destruction of everything that is good for the next 4 years, right? So if you're concerned about environmental issues, that's where I would get involved with someone like SUA, or the Sierra Club, or Heal Utah. So this is the thing. The biggest concern that I have right now is that every day that you're on your news feed, you're seeing, oh my God, and then something horrible happens, and then another horrible thing happens tomorrow, and we are getting overwhelmed. Is anyone even talking about Russian hacking anymore? Because so many things keep hitting us, and we're overwhelmed by it. And the danger is that we will have activist fatigue. Okay, they're like, oh my gosh, I can't keep up with everything. Nobody even cares about last week's scandal. So you've got to really kind of hone in on the issue that you are super passionate about. So if you are all about civil liberties, all right, then you're going to want to fire up with the ACLU. And if you are really concerned about women's health and reproductive justice, you're going to really want to sort of team up with Planned Parenthood. If LGBTQ issues are your thing, we're here for you. So find the issue that you're passionate, find the cause that you're fighting about, find out who is doing that work, and team up with them. And keep yourself sane. And don't forget to go to the ballet and to the opera and experience art and beauty, okay? You have to experience art and beauty, because that's really what we're fighting for, right? So, and enjoy our public parks while we still have them. All right? Sorry, you're right there. Yes. 5 votes. That's right. So yeah, getting involved in political campaigns is critical. There was a few races recently where our candidates lost by 100 votes, 115 votes. Yeah. It's so important that we get involved in political campaigns. We got to be planning for the midterms today, right? And I am having a fundraiser for our PAC next week, and just segue to that, because we have to raise money for candidates. You know, in Equality Utah, we'll be raising money for great candidates starting next week, and we have a PAC brunch. We're bringing a guy named Cleve Jones into town. Cleve Jones was Harvey Milk's protege. He worked with Harvey to overturn the Briggs Initiative in 1976, I think, which would have banned public school teachers who are gay. And Cleve is just a phenomenal activist. He's going to be speaking here on this stage a week from Saturday on the 11th at 4 p.m. And so if you want to get fired up by a veteran activist who knows how to beat the odds, come hear Cleve Jones speak here next week. Because you've got to know that even though the odds are against us, it doesn't matter. We're going to keep fighting for the world we want it to achieve. So, yep, way back there.
And on that website, there's a Facebook page also. On that website, there are different caucuses for different issues that you might be interested in being involved in. And they're working to set the agenda for those issues, and they meet regularly. So you can email the chair of that caucus, and they can get you on the email list so that you can start to be involved and push the issues and be involved and be a catalyst for what you want to see happen in those areas.
Yeah. Be the change we want to see in the world. Have you ever heard that before? What about some people way in the back? Right up there, yes. Are people ready to move on to our issues that we're fighting? Okay, all right, we're going to move on. Yeah. That's where you want to sign up for our action alerts. And we will actually, when a bad bill hits or a good bill hits, we'll be emailing out. And it's sort of like a layman's sort of breakdown of it.
So for our issues, yes, but Equality Utah, Planned Parenthood, whatever other organization you're interested in. So just for the remainder of the time, it's now 7:53. I want to be very mindful that we try and stay on track here. I think we'll go through very quickly some of the bills that we're all focused on, our 3 organizations. And why don't we hold questions while we run through these, and then we can break, and if people want to come up and talk about specific issues that they may have concerning the process or any of the bills, we can do that at that time.
So very quickly, Planned Parenthood, these are the bills that have come up so far. So basically our issues are maintaining access for abortion, safe and legal abortion across the state. We are seeing a couple of bills about that. We're also looking at our sex education statute to expand it, and so that we can include comprehensive sex education to give our kids some good foundation as they get out into the wild, wild world. And we want to expand access to health care. It seems kind of ironic that we're looking at repealing the ACA, but in the state of Utah, we're looking at expanding access to family planning services through Medicaid, which is awesome. And let me just say very quickly, I have in my pocket, if you're interested in signing up to receive information on our bills, I have this card. You just go on and sign up and become a Planned Parenthood ambassador. I'd be happy to come. I don't know if the woman is still up there. If she wants to have a house party and invite Senator Weiler over, I'd be happy to come and talk about my issues.
Sorry. These are a mix of good and bad. HB 154 and HB 141 are the bad bills. And so is 137. Oh, sorry, 137. Oh, yeah, I hadn't seen that one. Yeah, so the three bad bills are the ones in the middle, HB 154, 137, and 141. This is just a smattering, by the way, of all of the issues that we're working on, so definitely connect with our organizations if you want to hear about other issues. Okay, so I didn't put bill numbers because some of our issues don't yet have the bills released, but I'll just touch on some of the things, and these are all positive issues, actually. There are a lot of negative things, but these are all positive measures we'll be focusing on. One is to do away with the death penalty in our state. We came really close last year, and we're going to try again. For a couple of years now, we've been working with the Utah Women's Coalition. They were supposed to be here tonight, but we're stuck meeting with a legislator. But we've been working on expanding women's equality in the workplace, a lot of measures to make things easier for women. So in the past, we've worked on making sure that employers are providing accommodations for breastfeeding and pregnant women in the workplace. And this year, we're focusing on Family Medical Leave Act, making sure that not just women, but people who need time away from the workplace for a variety of reasons are able to do so. We're working on a bill with Planned Parenthood to remove barriers to abortion access, these so-called TRAP laws that we're seeing in our state and across the nation that are erecting barriers to women having access to reproductive freedom. And we're working on a bill with a representative to actually roll back at least one of those measures that we have in place here in Utah. Civil asset forfeiture is this really boring sounding title for something that's actually really terrible. Situation where private property can essentially be taken by the government without ever convicting you of any criminal charges. They can nevertheless take your property if they think it's somehow connected to a crime. So we're working on reforming our laws in the state with regards to civil asset forfeiture. This next issue is one that's really near and dear to me because, like non-discrimination that Troy mentioned, this issue took me 7 years to pass a bill. This is Election Day registration, the idea that you can register and cast a ballot on Election Day. We passed a bill a couple of years ago to put in place a pilot program where counties could opt in and try it out. And that pilot program expired in December. And so this year we're now seeking to make Election Day registration statewide and permanent. And this would, obviously help in the situations. The case of LeVar Christensen versus Harrison. Unfortunately, there were actually some Election Day registration votes cast, and unfortunately not enough to make that election result different. We're continuing our work on criminal justice reform, and this year focusing on the juvenile justice system, and so we'll be supporting a comprehensive piece of legislation to overhaul the juvenile justice system. Working again with Planned Parenthood and Equality Utah on making comprehensive sex ed, or I should say healthy relationships, available to Utah children. We're working on a variety of different measures to make community reentry easier for people who are coming out of the criminal justice system. We erect a tremendous number of barriers that make it hard for people, both in the workplace and in terms of securing housing, all things that can make it that much easier to just sort of fall back into that cycle. And so want to make things easier for people who are coming out of that situation. We'll be supporting a measure to expand access to end-of-life options. And then finally, continuing to push for opportunities to allow seriously ill patients to have access to medical marijuana, and at the very least to not be criminalized for that use.
Yeah, and so Equality Utah, we're also working closely with Planned Parenthood and ACLU on a variety of things. So one thing we're concerned about with the Affordable Care Act being stripped away, last year because of the Obama administration, for the first time, transgender folks, the ban on insurance coverage was lifted by the Obama administration because of the ACA. And So traditionally, transgender individuals haven't been able to get the coverage that they need because insurance companies, private insurance companies, said, we don't cover you. And Obama changed that, and now that is all at risk. And we're not sure what's going to happen with the ACA right now. There is some talk that it'll be turned back to the states to make decisions. If that is the case, then we've got to be right here in Utah fighting for our transgender friends and family. So, and we will be. What's not up here is our hate crimes bill. Senator Thatcher has a bill called victim selection penalty enhancement, and it's not very catchy, really. All right, but we're working with the statewide association of prosecutors. We've had a hate crime statute in this state for 20 years that has not convicted a single offender in 20 years, okay, because it's so weak and watered down. So we're working to change that, and Senator Thatcher is taking the lead, and we're excited about that. Sometimes, though, when the legislature fails you, or you know you can't move something forward, we do have litigation. We do have the judiciary. And so in October, Equality Utah filed a lawsuit against the State Board of Education to finally strike down our anti-gay curriculum laws. So that's coming. It's coming down. So that's going to be a while. We're going to be working that through the courts, and you know, it's just really important that we reduce the stigma that LGBTQ kids are experiencing. We want them to know that they are valued, that they belong, and they're loved in this community. So, so the other thing that we're concerned about. Every year, there are always these anti-LGBTQ bills that pop up. There are these so-called religious liberty bills that actually elevate religion so that it gives people, individuals, a license to discriminate against anybody they want, all right? And these, we call them RFRAs. You'll hear them called RFRAs, but they refer to the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And so far, every time that they've been introduced in our state, we've been able to defeat them. And we have not seen any yet, but we're only 2 weeks into the session. So keep your eyes open. We're also concerned about transgender access to bathrooms for students. One was about to be introduced last year by Senator Jackson. We were able to defeat it before it came out of rules last year. And then Senator Jackson has moved, of course, of all places, to North Carolina. So I'm sure he'll be very much at home there. And so, but we want to be vigilant because organizations like the Eagle Forum, this is a pet project for them, and I have no doubt that it will probably pop up in some form. So we're waiting right now. It's been a little bit quiet for us, but we need to be vigilant. So that's where it's at. And so those are the issues that we are fired up with right now. So please stay in touch with us. Again, like I said earlier, you know, get involved in our organizations, come to our events, come to our rallies, etc. Because this is where the action is, and now more than ever, we have a chance to really have an impact. So I just want to take a few, these are our websites, and then we can, and then, yeah.
I just wanted to recognize, I see Stephanie Pitcher from the Utah Women's Coalition in the back. Stephanie, can you raise your hand just so people can see you? Definitely, if you're interested in issues that affect women in our state, she is the go-to person, has single-handedly started this coalition, and her contact information is here as well.
Okay. Do you want to take a few questions, or are we going to want to break things up? Just take about 4 or 5 questions. Right there. Great. Awesome. Great. Cool. Conversations change everything. This is what Harvey Milk always taught us. He said, come out. And even if you're not gay or transgender, come out as an ally and talk about your friends and your families. Whether you're talking about gay issues or you're talking about medical cannabis, whatever it is, come out as an activist and tell your story, and it will change people's hearts. Yep. Yes, yes.
So I love that study out of Oregon, and they actually replicated it again and had people go out and tell their stories about their abortion, and they were able to move people. And so the power of storytelling can't be minimized too much. I mean, it moves people and moves them permanently to be more empathetic and understand what life looks like for you.
Okay. HB 11.
So, so the question was about voting rights bills and about HB 11, which is a bill dealing with state commissions and changing the sort of required number of Republicans and Democrats on each of those commissions. That bill was debated, I think, on the floor today and passed. You know, that bill is so interesting, too. I watched you all, people like you on Facebook, get concerned about this bill, and it was so amazing to watch people reaching out to their legislators and writing on Facebook what they had said and their responses, and it did hold things up for a little while. So I think, you know, I know it's still on the move, but as we talked about before, there are lots of ways to kill a bill. And so just because it's made it through the House doesn't mean it's a done deal by any stretch of the imagination. So keep at it. I think that's proof that these sorts of actions that we take can really slow things down. On the voting issues, we care about those issues as well and are following a lot of them. There are a ton of voting issues this year. That's partially because there were a lot of hiccups with this last election, at least here in Salt Lake, moving to by mail voting, and then various other issues as well, polling locations limited and things like that. So in response, of course, legislators are running all sorts of bills to fix a lot of those issues. Yeah. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Polling. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of really good ones. I mean, as I mentioned before, the Election Day registration one is the top priority for us, but there's a lot of other really great bills. There's an automatic voter registration bill that Representative Handy is running that would sort of make it automatic when you go to get your driver's license, that you would automatically be opted in to be registered to vote. I think that's a great way to increase voter access. And there's a couple other really good ones. Just, you know, try to maybe connect up with a group that focuses on voting rights so that you can parse through the ones that are good from the ones that are bad, because there are probably some bad ones in there as well. Yeah.
Well, keep in mind that Utah was one of the reasons why you know that the ERA didn't pass originally. So Senator Baucus, thanks to the Utah Women Unite who organized the rally 2 weeks ago. They're working with Senator Baucus, and we're going to be introducing a ratification bill. Now, this is going to be this is going to be a tough sell, right? But the important thing is that we use this opportunity to raise the consciousness in this state and to push the dialogue forward. So Equality Utah is going to be supporting that effort. And the biggest thing that I want all of you to do with this bill is make some noise, all right? And get in people's faces and really drive a conversation. Why has the Equal Rights Amendment not passed? Why? Keep asking the question. That's it. Keep asking the question, and that's what we're going to be doing with this session. Right behind you. Yeah. Yeah. Wait, a couple more. Yep. Yeah, the question is, do we keep bugging them? And the answer is yes. Keep bugging them. Absolutely. So, and one more question, and then we'll wrap up. Mm-hmm. That's a lot. The question is, how do I get all my personal information and what I want to get out to my legislator in a text message? You're a millennial. You're good at this, right? Yeah. Just start typing. Get it in there, and but put your most salient point. Say, I'm your constituent, okay? And I feel this about this issue. Yep. That's right. Yeah, Marina says if Donald Trump can change the global policy with 140 characters, you can do it in a tweet, or you can do a text. Yeah. One more, all the way back there.
I think Facebook, this is just my personal experience, is super useful for organizing. I'm not sure it's useful for changing anybody's minds. If your feed looks like mine, it's like people are in one camp or the other, and it's not worth getting into a Facebook fight. It just ends up making everybody feel worse, and nobody's minds end up getting changed. But I do think as an organizing tool, it's amazing, and UACT has been an incredible illustration of that. Gail Ruzicka in the Eagle Forum has long been sort of this hallowed name here in Utah. She's got all this power. She orchestrates the Utah legislature. And one of her biggest tools has always been the phone tree. She could activate people in the community just by picking up the phone and alert them and get people organized around a bill when it was coming up for a vote. Well, we're in the era of Facebook and Twitter and texting and everything else, and I think she's got nothing on us. We can do the very same thing. So Twitter and Facebook, I think, are incredibly important. I guarantee every legislator up at the Capitol is on Twitter. Some of them are always on Twitter. Todd Weiler, I'm looking at you. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good place to tweet at your legislator and let them know that you're paying attention to a particular bill and that you care. Oh, yeah. So I'm trying to think where we can make them available. I'm sure we can. Oh, perfect. Fantastic. Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, at the front if you want to sign in. We can probably post them on our websites as well if you would like to consult them there as well. All right. Thank you guys so much. You've been an incredible audience. What a treat. We'll see you up at the Capitol.